Hi, I'm Lizzie Moore, and I want to welcome you to Placer Clean on Auburn Community Television. The purpose of this show is to educate and inspire action around climate change and to give you specific tools and information that you can use every day to tackle this huge issue that we have. I need to get on my soapbox for just a minute so I can get it out of the way and say that in my opinion, climate change is the most important issue that we have in front of us. And the reason why is because if we don't have a stable climate, if we have extreme weather events that are more frequent and of more intensity, if we start having food and water issues, if the general conditions of our planet don't provide for a healthy environment for humans, all of the other issues that we have before us, and there's big ones, they're all going to be infinitely harder to tackle. And so that's why I think that this is something that we all need to pay attention to. The good news is that scientists say that we have about 10 years to change our course, and that is to reduce the number of greenhouse gases that we're putting out on a regular basis, and also take a lot of the carbon and methane and other greenhouse gases that are already in the environment, take it out of the environment. And 10 years is not a lot of time, but it's 10 years and we can do it. And so I hope that you'll use this show to give you more information and more inspiration to take action on this. Normally we come to you from Placer County, California, but today we're coming to you from the state capitol. And I would like to introduce my guest for today. I am honored and privileged to introduce Lenny Mendonca, and he is the Chief Economic and Business Advisor to Governor Newsome and the Director of the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. He's a Senior Partner Emeritus of McKinsey & Company and a lecturer on inequality at the Stanford Business School. But the way that I know Lenny is because when I was getting started about 20 years ago, the Half Moon Bay Brewing Company was also getting started. Half Moon Bay is my beloved hometown, and I was the marketing manager there for about 2 years. And so Lenny is an owner, and I got to know him and his family over the course of those years. And now we're just seeing each other again today. So thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm really excited to hear what you have to say.
My pleasure, Lizzie, and it's great to see you again.
Yeah.
And it was great working with you almost 2 decades ago now, and I'd love to see what you're doing now. So happy to talk about this really important set of issues, and I'm really glad that you're doing this in a way that helps bring facts and helpful perspective to the residents of your region. So thanks for asking me to join you.
Good, great. Well, I'll just dive right in. I was hoping that you could address what the consequences would be if we don't tackle climate change, specifically economically. What would the economic consequences be?
Sure. I mean, California has been a leader in the United States and in many ways setting some standards for the rest of the world on the importance of addressing climate change and addressing it forcefully and urgently. Mm-hmm. We early on set some aggressive targets for the state in terms of our reduction in CO2. We have met those, but we are upping our expectations about what we need to do to reduce our climate emissions. In fact, if we're going to meet the objectives that we've got for the next decade, we need to double the annual rate that we did in the last decade. Right. And so this is not a small change in our trajectory, but California is good at doing this stuff. We look at big problems and say, let's set an aggressive goal and figure out how to get there. And we did. Yeah. We did it in a way that did reduce emissions in the state of California, and at the same time catalyzed a whole series of innovations in the state that were good not just for the state, but for the rest of the country and indeed the rest of the world. So you may not know this, but last year, California's second largest product export, and it was only second by a few $1 million, it was close to being number one, mm-hmm. was zero emission vehicles.
Wow.
And so up from a product category in an industry that didn't exist when I last talked to you,
right,
to California's second largest export.
Wow.
That's enormous.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So the opportunity to use this not just as the urgency of an existential threat to our planet,
right,
but aligned with an opportunity to catalyze innovation in the state of California, create new industries,
right,
create new jobs. It's really, really important, and that's how California is going to go about this. This is urgent and has to be dealt with that urgency, mm-hmm. but we're a state that innovates, and we innovate at scale. Mm-hmm. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. When California moves, the world moves.
Right.
So this has been a priority. in Republican administrations and Democratic administrations in the state of California, and this governor and his team believes it even more urgently. And so we're going to continue that path and accelerate it by ensuring that California can meet its climate objectives and doing it in a way that is both good for climate and good for the economy.
Great, that's great. And can you speak for a minute about the tension that people perceive and in some cases feels real between economic growth and being innovative and meeting all these goals,
right?
So growing economically and being prosperous, but then also protecting the climate. Like, can we do both at the same time?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
And it's the model that California is showing the country and the world that can be done.
Right.
California's GDP grew faster than the country in the last 5 years and the last decade.
Yeah.
We're doing that at the same time we've met these climate objectives. California is a high standard state. We believe in innovation. We believe in growth. Half the venture capital in the United States comes to the state of California. Mm-hmm. There's a reason. We're the place where the future is invented. But at the same time, we want to grow in a way that is innovative and forward-leaning, but also makes that economy more inclusive. So we have to have more people in the state of California who have the ability to take advantage of that innovation, and we have to do it in a way that's sustainable and resilient to climate change and other things that come at us. We're showing the way to do that.
Yeah.
There is a misconceived sense that these are trade-offs. They're actually integrated.
Right.
The economy can't grow and be innovative unless it includes everyone.
Right.
The economy cannot be sustainable for the long term unless we address fundamental issues that are enormous consequences, and they're not theoretical. Climate change is here and now.
Right.
I'm sure that everyone where you live and everyone who's looking at the TV about what's going on just happened in Australia.
Right.
And what happened last summer and the summer before that, and will happen again in terms of the issues of extreme weather events, forest fires, sea level rise. You look at what's going on in the Mississippi Delta right now about rising flooding zones. These are all of what's happening. This is not something that is a consequence that could happen 20 or 30 years from now. It's happening now.
Right. Yeah. And I think in our area, I mean, just with the fires, and I feel like there's a tipping point. I feel like more and more people are starting to say like, hey, yes, you're right. We really do need to work on this now. And fires in Australia, the Camp Fire, all of that. But even people in our area, insurance. I mean, people are being dropped from their insurance. And so it seems like the whole economy has to find a way to shift and just like transform. It's like rising to another level. And I guess we're in the midst of it, and it's not always comfortable.
No, it's not comfortable, but you're right at a perfect microcosm of what's going on more broadly in the country and around the world.
Right.
This intersection of these events makes it very visible to people that this is not theoretical. And it's not just in an abstraction when you have a forest fire right next door.
Right.
It's not an abstraction when homes are falling off of cliffs because of rising sea level rise.
Right, yeah.
And what is also happening is that the markets are now understanding that whether this is currently a government policy or not, it is an issue. And the reason that fire insurance and homeowners insurance costs are going up is because the insurance industry is recognizing that's a big risk, and they need to price it into the insurance policies.
Right.
So, and then finally, the capital markets more broadly are already pricing these things into how they make decisions. And so we just need to align all of this and help people understand that this is the way the world is going. The final thing I'd say is it's extraordinarily important what the next generation who are now engaging, your generation and the one behind you, are engaging in the workforce, engaging politically, and they understand viscerally and for themselves and their children that we cannot have a planet that is uninhabitable. And they are forcing change to happen, and I think that's a great thing. So the intersection of personal experience, the capital markets, and business more generally, and individuals engaging locally, politically, in their workplaces. This issue is not a concept anymore. It is right in front of us, and it's extraordinarily urgent.
Right. And so there's a couple of stories of really big businesses making differences. Like I know Amazon, Jeff Bezos just announced a huge environmental fund. And then the company BlackRock, which is the investment company, it's probably not an investment, there's probably some other word for it, but it's a huge investment company. And they're saying that they are now looking at all of their investments through the climate lens. And so they won't invest if the risk is, they don't want to invest if the risk is too high, right? And so I think that that's a really good way to set an example. I mean, when you have huge companies like that changing, but like you said, people, everyday people engaging. So businesses that are like mom and pop businesses, or like the brewing company, which is, it's not a mom and pop, but it's not huge. How do you think that business owners and employees, how should we proceed with making sure that this is a top issue?
Sure. Well, first of all, BlackRock is not a small entity. BlackRock's the largest holder of institutional assets in the world.
Right.
They are long-term asset holders. State Street as well has made this very explicit, another large institutional asset holder,
right,
that we are expecting everyone to be disclosing, be transparent, and pricing in the risk of climate change.
Right.
And so that's also was part of the executive order that the governor of California led to help encourage states' investment funds, CalPERS and CalSTRS, in their fiduciary role,
yep,
to understand that as long-term asset holders, you need to understand and price into your companies that you're investing in and the funds that you're investing in,
right,
climate risk. So
right,
those are straightforward business decisions, and it is moving the discussion and moving businesses to engage in different ways. That at a personal level and a much more local level,
right,
you can do this from the beginning. Think about your company, think about your behavior as though you were affecting the planet, because you are.
Right.
And so individual decisions multiplied by large numbers of people and large numbers of small businesses equal the economy.
Right.
2/3 of the economy is consumer spending.
Yeah.
The largest number of businesses in the state of California are small businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So if we really want to make a dent on this, we need to align all of these things and help ensure that people, businesses of all sizes, are actually building into their decision making,
right,
how to think about sustainability and climate change. So we all have to contribute to this. This is not going to get solved by saying, well, the government's going to put hundreds of billions of dollars into it, or it's somebody else's problem. It's
right,
all of our problem.
Yeah, no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, I had a fantasy that as people are making their small business plans and everything, that like it's like the ice bucket challenge, or that something that everybody does. It's like, hey, I paid attention to the climate. I mean, I don't know what it would be. There's obviously something has to be a little more snazzy than that. But like if we are getting acknowledged by talking about it, and that we're bragging to our friends and family about the changes that we made, I think that would be. I don't
think that's a fantasy. I think it's already happening.
Yeah.
There are certifications that certify that people are behaving in sustainably responsible ways.
Right.
The County of San Mateo, for example, has a certified green business award for companies, small businesses in particular, that are operating in a sustainable way, and they go through and score you. Actually, the brewery was the first sustainable green business on the coast.
Oh, that's awesome.
There are for-benefit companies that within the state code are set up that way.
Yeah.
The certification process some of that is done in different ways, but the most well-known one are B Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And B Corps go through a certification process of, are you behaving that way?
Right.
It includes a whole set of things, but one of those is behavior as it relates to climate and sustainability more broadly.
Yeah.
And those, when you have that symbol and certification, it tells consumers and employees that this is a good place that's doing it in a way that's in an integrated way,
right,
good for the long-term health of the planet, people, and the community.
Right.
And so I just think that's where the world is moving.
Yeah.
California has been a leader in this.
Yeah.
We continue to be a leader, whether it's people deciding where they want to work or people deciding where they want to shop.
Right.
Are increasingly looking for these things.
Right. So before you were you were talking about everybody becoming green, and I wanted to talk a little bit about making going green more affordable and more accessible, and if you want, maybe talk a little bit about how that relates to social inequality and sort of, I know it's all connected.
No, they are interconnected, and it was a little bit of the, as we started at the top, how we think about what California capitalism is. Yeah. California capitalism is innovation, inclusivity and sustainability, three legs to the same stool.
Right.
And they have to all work together. A lot of the early effort in climate change has been really important and moved the needle,
Right.
but it has been too focused on those who can afford to do it, as
Right.
opposed to available for everyone.
Right.
And so both through bonding purposes, through grants, and increasingly we hope through a proposal that the governor has in his budget on a climate catalyst fund that would help catalyze the next wave of innovation in a way that creates large-scale private sector investment, but does it in a way that is more inclusive of the state. So, for example, if you drive an electric vehicle,
Right.
it's not as easy to do if you happen to live in an apartment or not in a place where you have easy access to charging.
Right.
We need to have equipment, electric charging equipment everywhere.
Right.
That is going to happen if you catalyze investment to ensure that it's done, and it has to be purposeful to ensure that it's done in a way that is inclusive of the full range of California's residents,
Right.
wherever they live.
Right.
And so we do need to be deliberate about how we do that. And it's important from a climate objective. If you said one of the most important things we can do is to move our entire transportation system
Right.
to zero emission,
Right.
you're not going to do that if you're only taking luxury cars.
Right.
You have to go all cars. You have to do buses.
Right.
You have to do trucks. You have to do equipment. You
Right.
have to do trains.
Right.
So we have to do the entire system, and that's when we get to the scale of change that we're looking for.
Yeah, and what came to me is I think of people who live in apartments and want solar panels, but they might have the money to buy the solar panels, but they don't have the actual, they can't change the building because they don't
Right.
own it. And so, like you were talking about, the Catalyst Fund, that could fund apartment owners, and it's
Exactly.
like how the domino gets going. That's great.
And you also see, apartment owners and large commercial buildings
Yeah.
are completely in their economic interest doing that.
Right.
Because it's now at a point where if you do it properly, you're saving money.
Right.
And so, done properly, we ought to be encouraging everyone to do what's both in their rational economic interest and in the best interest of the planet.
Right. So another question that I have for you is about affordable housing. And again, I guess a lot of my questions all are kind of in the same thing. It's like, how do we hold this tension? Because as an example, in Placer County, we just had a really big housing development approved. Wonderful builders, great people who are all for the plan, but those of us who opposed the plan were not opposed to building because we need more affordable housing in our state for sure. But it's going to cover a lot of land that would store carbon. It's going to bring lots and lots of new transportation, like meaning car emissions and that sort of thing. There's not public transportation built into the plan, and so the idea, in my opinion, is to build smarter, like still build, but build smarter. But it feels like it needs to happen right now, and so I guess my question is like, as we're building more housing, how do we ensure that we're doing it in the right way for long-term
Sure.
longevity,
Well, the first point to make, as the governor made in his State of the State speech,
Yeah.
is the urgency of dealing with housing production
Yeah.
is completely interrelated to the challenges of homelessness.
Right.
And we need to build at pace and scale now.
Right.
We can't just put this off. We are
Right.
building 100,000 new units a year when we should be building 250 or 300,000 a year. So
Right.
we are not anywhere near what we need to do.
Yeah.
But we need to do that in a way that is smart and sustainable.
Right.
And that includes building more densely around transit hubs.
Right.
It includes ensuring that we have more housing where people are commuting to today so that they can live closer to where they work and not have to commute
Right.
long distances.
Right.
So there are nearly 100,000 people every day who commute from the northern San Joaquin Valley into the Bay Area and from the Inland Empire into Los Angeles, San Diego, and Orange County.
Right.
That is not sustainable on any dimension.
Right.
And so what we need is more housing where the jobs are. That means more densification, particularly around transit.
Right.
And we need more jobs where people are commuting from
Yeah.
so they don't have to commute that distance for economic opportunity.
Right.
And then we need much more efficient, zero emission transportation to connect those.
Right.
And so that's all part of an integrated plan
Yeah.
that says we need to have continue that innovation, much of which is occurring on the coasts, where there's job creation in excess of our housing production.
Right.
We need to do it more inclusively so that there's jobs where people are,
right.
as opposed to people going to where jobs are.
Right.
And then we need to have a transit system that isn't people sitting in their car,
right.
emitting carbon dioxide and
right.
pollution
right.
For 2 hours a day each way, destroying the planet and their communities and their lives at the same time.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. I talk about climate change. I go and do talks, and one of the things I usually say at the end is focus on what we're working towards. And so if you were to imagine a higher quality of life, like clean water, clean air, and so it's like, wow, what if you didn't have to spend 4 hours of your day commuting?
Exactly.
Like, regardless of what other benefit, it's and I think looking at sort of transforming not just our economy, but our whole, just our way of life, if we look at what we do want and what we're going to, it could actually be better.
It absolutely can.
Yeah.
And, there's the fact that we are having this enormous job creation happening in the state.
Yeah.
And that we're having people commute long distances.
Right.
And that people can't afford to live here because we're not building housing fast enough. Those are all things that we need to have a different perspective on them.
Right.
That's where the notion of innovation is great, but doing it sustainably and more inclusively can help square those circles.
Right.
And it squares the circles at a human level.
Right.
Sitting in a car for 2 hours each way is bad in every possible way.
Right.
It's bad for you, it's bad for your community, it's
Yeah.
bad for your family, it's
right.
bad for your health, it's
right.
bad for the planet.
Yeah.
And it's bad economically, so we have to have a different way to do this.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say is the most important or powerful thing that individuals could do around climate change, knowing that we all have to pay the bills and we have our lives?
Sure. I'm not sure I can give you just one thing.
Okay, well, that's
I'll give you
okay. Couple.
The first one is to engage.
Okay.
And so that means show up at your community meetings. That means show up at the city council planning commission meetings.
Right.
It means registering and voting.
Right.
It means showing up at your workplace and saying these are important issues to us and we need to do something about them for your employers.
Right.
It means telling your friends and family about how important it is to you, even if they disagree with you in normal cases on politically, having an honest conversation around the facts and talking like we're talking is
right.
important. So
right.
engage is
yep.
the first thing.
Yep.
Second thing is little steps of individual behavior done collectively make a big difference.
Yeah.
And so all of the things that I'm sure you talk about around what can you do in terms of your consumption,
mm-hmm.
what can you do about your waste,
yep.
what can you do about the products that you buy,
right.
what can you do about when you're making a decision about big decisions like you're going to buy a new car,
right.
what kind of car do you buy?
Yeah.
When you're looking at little decisions like, do I want to buy that individual disposable plastic container or
right.
not? Those decisions in aggregate make a huge difference. And so I think
right.
it's engaging and being conscious of your own individual behavior
yeah.
and what you're doing in ways that are just recognizing that individual convenience for the sake of your convenience may not be the best answer.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that. So I have a couple of climate goals for my own personal household. Like 2 years ago, we did solar panels, and then last year we did the electric vehicle, and so we're trying to do. And the one that I set for this year is I would rather pull out my fingernails than do it, and it's to change to a local bank, because I've had the same major bank for 20 years. It was like I got a bank account when I was 18 years old, and it's like everything's set up. It's super convenient. I feel comfortable, safe, and everything. And this is the behavior change. It's like, okay, I even bought solar panels before I switched banks because I didn't want to so much. And so I think there's something to acknowledge with, behavior change in human beings. Like we kind of I was on a walk last night and I was like, just stop being lazy, just do it. Like, come on, you need to say that you've done everything that you can. And so anyway, I think that there's this whole underlying behavioral change that is so hard and painful.
It is, but you have a child. I have a new granddaughter.
Yeah.
5 months old. And when you start thinking,
by the way.
she's so gorgeous. But when you think about the world through their eyes, you have a different view about the behavior that you should be doing.
Right.
And so, they get it if they're old enough to understand what's going on, and they are the future, and
Right.
they are going to change it. And
Right.
so we need to make sure that they have the chance to change it and help do the sorts of things that makes the world a better place for them, not destroying the planet while we have the responsibility.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, transitioning from short to long-term thinking, and just, it's sort of going back to that 7 generations thing. Like,
Yeah.
if I'm doing this for my grandkids,
Exactly.
what is it? Yeah.
Exactly, and that's
Yeah.
the way to think about it as a small business person too. If
Right.
you're starting a business and you were going to be that business was in your family for multiple generations, what would you do?
Right.
You wouldn't be destroying the community. You wouldn't be polluting
Right.
the rivers. You wouldn't be taking advantage of the people you're hiring. You'd treat it all like it's a family,
Right.
and a multi-generational approach.
Right.
And if we all behave that way and go back to some of those first principles, I think we'll all be better off.
Yeah, or a local farmer that I just heard was like, I'm going to take care of the soil, not the plant. So it's just more regenerative. Okay, so the last question I have is something I'm going to be asking all of my guests, and that is, what are you personally or your household doing? Like, I'm going to change banks, and I bought a solar panel, hang dry my laundry, you know?
So we have not purchased energy in our household for almost 20 years now, because we have solar and electric vehicles, so that just helps with the integrated.
Right.
But the biggest thing that we're looking at now we are doing is changing all of the light bulbs and things that are, it's a little bit of a pain too.
Right.
It's more money up front,
Right.
but it saves money in the long run, and it's a
Right.
huge drain on energy. Just get an energy audit for
Right.
your house,
Right.
and look at all the things that are sucking energy. Throw away that 10-year-old freezer.
Right. Right.
Don't buy as much
Right.
that you're going to throw out half the time.
Right.
Turn off the lights when you're not in the room. All those things that are little behavior changes will both save you money and be good for the planet. So that's what we're doing. Is Christina and I are going through and just looking at where are the different places that we do things. And if you just start it from, I'm just going to be a penny pincher.
Yeah.
Not do things that waste energy. What would you
Right.
do?
Right.
Why are you driving for something that you could walk to?
Right.
What can you do to help ensure that when you're not using your computer, that you turn it off and unplug it?
Right.
Or that you don't leave the heat on when you're not in the room.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
Right.
That adds up.
Right.
So.
Right. So paying attention to the little things.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I will conclude this interview, but I wanted to thank you for coming and giving your wisdom and your expertise, but also everything that you're doing for my beloved coast-side, and just for everything that you're doing for the state, and I really, really appreciate it. So
My pleasure. It's great to see you again.
Yeah.
Great conversation, and I really applaud you for helping get this out in the community. That's where this makes a difference, is having real conversations with real people. So thank you.
all right, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Great seeing you again.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope that this gave you more information and inspiration to talk about climate change and to actually take daily action, because we can do this. We can do this. We are capable. We have the willpower. We have the technology. And please watch my next show. Thank you so much.